Welcome. I'm Sandra Archibald, the Dean of the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance and co-chair of the Search Committee. I appreciate you joining us today, both in person and remotely, to welcome our third provost candidate to the University of Washington. As President Cauce says, choosing a provost will be the most important decision she makes this year, so your engagement and feedback is critical. Today I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Mark Richards. Mark Richards is a professor of Earth and Planetary Science at the University of California, Berkeley. He received a bachelor's degree in engineering from the University of Texas at Austin and a master's in applied physics and a PhD in geophysics from Caltech, followed by a postdoc at the Australian National University. Richards served on the faculties of the University of Oregon, the University of Washington, and has been at Berkeley for most of his academic career. He served as Dean of Mathematical and Physical Sciences at Berkeley from 2002 to 2014, and simultaneously as Executive Dean of the College of Letters and Science from 2006 to 2014. Dr. Richards returned to full-time teaching and research in 2014 and has also continued to serve as Berkeley's Special Assistant for Diversity in the Mathematical and Physical Sciences. He is the principal investigator on several major federal and private foundation grants supporting STEM diversity. And he created the California Alliance Program, an NSF-supported collaboration among Berkeley, Stanford, Caltech, and UCLA to promote diversity among PhD students, postdocs, and faculty in STEM fields. For this work, he has received Berkeley's two highest awards for contributions to diversity: the Academic Senate's Leon Henkin Citation and the Chancellor's Award for Advancing Institutional Excellence. Richards enjoys teaching at all levels, including the experimental course on the subject of time as part of the campus's Big Ideas courses, a program he helped establish as Executive Dean of Letters and Science. He also worked to establish Berkeley's Teaching Excellence Colloquium, now required of all new faculty, and collaborated with Berkeley's graduate and undergraduate student associations to establish the UC system's first academic honor code. Richards' research is focused on dynamic processes in the interior of the Earth and the terrestrial planets, and how these processes affect geological phenomena such as plate tectonics and volcanic eruptions. His work includes observational, experimental, and computational methods. He received NSF's Presidential Young Investigators Award as a Fellow of the American Geological Union and the California Academy of Sciences. His published work includes 17 papers in the journals Science and Nature. Richard's current research includes fieldwork in the Galapagos and in India. In his spare time, Richards enjoys skiing, mountaineering, golf, and occasionally attempting to play acoustic blues guitar. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Mark Richards.
Hello. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be back at the University of Washington after many years of absence. I'm really humbled by this occasion. I have never given a talk of this nature before in my life, and I'm going to apologize in advance for all the things that I failed to mention, because when you're asked to talk about the future of higher education, there are many books that have been written about this. I have probably learned enough today to rewrite the talk completely, so I'll be doing that a little bit on the fly. So I wanted to start off with just telling you a little bit about myself and where I came from. I grew up in a very small town in East Texas, a small college town where my father was a music professor and my mother was a music teacher and a math teacher. When I say small, it had one traffic light, literally. It also had two separate school systems. It was completely segregated town, as was common where I grew up in East Texas. It turns out in the long run this had a big influence on me. My grandfather, for example, was the only merchant in downtown commerce who would sell to African American people, for which he suffered greatly. And the obligation that I feel from that upbringing has played out in the last 10 years or so of my career in ways that I'll describe. I went to the University of Texas to study engineering because my whole life had been music up until then, and I wanted to know how things worked. And I figured out that I was a little more interested in science and engineering in time, and I went to Caltech to study physics as a graduate student. Simultaneously discovered that I like being outdoors a lot and in the mountains. I've climbed most of the Cascades peaks. And then I fell in with a bunch of geologists who seemed to be having more fun than I was, and figured out that geophysics was kind of like doing physics in the mountains. And I became a geophysicist and returned to Caltech at the Seismolab to complete my PhD. I was on the faculty at the University of Oregon, made a very difficult decision after several years to move to UC Berkeley, and have spent most of my career there. A couple things happened at Berkeley. One was I met my wife, Sarah, who is a medical student at UCSF, and I also received an offer a few years later to the University of Washington, and which I accepted, and I came here because it was my dream job to be in Seattle. But unfortunately, it did not work out for Sarah to transfer to medical school here, and so Berkeley made me an equally impressive offer to come back, and that was an easy choice to make. So it's worked out okay, but for those of you who are wondering why I was here for a brief time, consider that matter cleared. At Berkeley, I became a department chair, and then a lot of this involves family. My wife was offered an opportunity to do a residency at Johns Hopkins University, and I needed 2 years off. And at the same time, Carol Christ, who's now our chancellor but was provost, asked me if I would serve as interim dean for a year, and I said, I got a deal for you. I'll do that if you let me go for 2 years afterward. And so that's what I did, and watched the twins while Sarah went to boot camp, for otherwise known as medical residency at Johns Hopkins University. And when I returned to Berkeley, they asked me to be dean full time, which I thought would be for a little while, and it turned out to be 12 years. During that time, I also served simultaneously as executive dean of the College of Letters and Science, which was a great honor to me, having come from a liberal arts kind of music background, to find myself back in that realm as well. I was asked to speak a little bit about my accomplishments and challenges as dean, so with all due humility and with the excuse for using the I word when in fact most things are team efforts, let me tell you a little bit about what I faced. The mathematical and physical sciences at Berkeley are somewhat legendary. All of the departments are ranked in the top 3 in the country, and I was told when I took the job that if any of them fell out of the top 5, I would be fired. And so the main job was keep things excellent. But there was a real problem. The physics department, arguably one of the most famous departments in all of academia, 6 Nobel laureates on the active faculty at the time, was in trouble. And they blamed their problems largely on infrastructure, which was true, but there were also cultural problems that needed to be addressed. There was a review of the department the year after I became dean that described them as a department of, in genteel decline and resting on its laureates. Another challenge was that up to that time, Berkeley had done very little fundraising, and there was no fundraising going on in the Division of Mathematical and Physical Sciences, and I really needed to get that going. During my time as dean, we suffered the same serial budget crises, probably worse at Berkeley than you've had here at University of Washington. The other problem I came to recognize very quickly was that, perhaps against cliche, if you say, what are the great scientific problems in the world? Clean energy, security, health care, etc. I discovered that in the United States, the greatest scientific problem is the lack of representation of women and underrepresented minorities in the field, where if you account for that in a proper way, you're missing about half the talent in the country. And I decided that, in a nod to my grandfather and my experience growing up, that this was going to be very important for me as well. I'm going to go through some of this as quick as I can because I have a couple stories I'm hoping to have time to tell. But in a nutshell, we were able to raise about $160 million to provide new facilities for physical sciences. And this came from multiple sources, which was a really important lesson I learned, which is it didn't all come from the state, it didn't all come from donors, it didn't all come from the feds. A critical moment was when I became friends with John Perez, who's the Speaker of the California Assembly, the first openly gay and Hispanic member or speaker, certainly, who cared a lot about diversity. And it was my interest, frankly, in diversity that resonated with John and helped us secure $65 million in state funding, which is, I'm not bragging about that other than to say that the ability of deans and administrators to pay attention to what the state cares about and legislators care about turns out to be very important. I was able to raise funding for a number of interdisciplinary centers on campus, the Center for Atmospheric Science, Center for Integrated Planetary Science, Center for Computational Biology, Earthquake Early Warning, the Center for Theoretical Physics, the Berkeley Center for Cosmological Physics, and the Simons Institute for a Theory of Computing. And all of these, the same lesson is that philanthropy seeds multiple sources. I keep the book Stone Soup over my desk because really, for those of you who know the apocryphal tale, you really end up, if you make multiple constituencies things that they all have ownership, then you tend to gather a lot more support. On the diversity front, I was, well, several things. First of all, I appointed the first 6 women who ever served as chairs of departments of mathematical and physical sciences at Berkeley. They all turned out to be wonderful. And we also doubled the number of women faculty in the division during the 12 years when I was dean. So I was very, very happy about that and frankly put a good bit of pressure on the departments to make sure that those things happened. We were able to establish the CalTeach program at Berkeley where we had trained very few K through 12 math and science teachers. We now have 500 students enrolled in this program that's focused on urban public schools, which we're very, very proud of. I certainly didn't do that myself, but it's a program that I spearheaded. We created the SMASH Summer Boot Camp for underrepresented students in their post-freshman, sophomore, junior years in high school, all of whom are going to 4-year colleges in STEM fields. And this led to the creation, as was mentioned in my introduction, of the California Alliance, which is designed to leverage the collective prestige of Berkeley, Caltech, Stanford, and UCLA to diversify the ranks of postdocs and faculty in the mathematical, physical sciences, computer sciences. This has been an extraordinary, again, in the stone soup mold. In this particular project, we had funding from the National Science Foundation for 4 postdocs, but we had a national advertisement where you could be considered by all 4 of these institutions simultaneously. So if you're a physicist applying, an underrepresented physicist applying for one of these positions, all 4 of these institutions were going to look at your resume. So we got a good group of applications. We had funding for 4 and we hired 26, which by my calculations is 4.5 to 1 matching. And the way this worked is that these applicants were so good and so compelling that the institutions came up with the resources on their own, sometimes from donors and sometimes from their own coffers. And we proved a point, which is that no dean or chair can look us in the eye and say, oh, we would love to hire underrepresented postdocs if we could only find them. They are there, they are exceptionally talented, and we found them. And when we found them, the institutions found the resources to bring them on board, which leads to a larger lesson, which is that evidence-based practices and data lead to results in this field. And I'm convinced that the problems of diversity that we face in the sciences, particularly, but across the board in academia, are solvable if we are willing to hold a mirror up to ourselves and own up to our shortcomings, examine the data that we have, and become familiar with the literature on the methodologies and approaches that actually work. Excuse me, I've been talking all day. I'm going to have a sip. Another aspect that I wanted to emphasize is that I inherited kind of budgetary chaos when I became dean. Two of my departments were in deep deficit, and hardly any of the department chairs, much less their managers, really understood their own budgets. And so for my own good, I instituted a series of annual budget hearings for the departments and empowered my own budget officer to work with the department managers to create a budget statement for each department annually that not only I and the chair, but also any faculty member in their department could easily understand. That's a lot of work. That's hard work. It's an iterative process, and it took 2 or 3 years to get it right. But in the end, what we ended up with is department chairs and managers who truly understood their budget, a dean who understood their budgets and their strategic issues, and discussions that came down more to issues of strategic goals of the department rather than, line 42 with teaching assistants and what does that number mean. So I'm a bit of a budget fanatic when it comes to trying to communicate and understand budgets, and I'm somewhat dismissive of the word transparency because it's a half measure. The word I like to use is clarity. Clarity across the board is something that is very hard to achieve. It takes a team effort, but when you achieve it, you create not only understanding but mutual trust. And this to me is really encapsulates my attitude about budget, because when hard decisions have to be made, if people understand where those decisions are coming from, then everything goes better. As executive dean, first of all, what is the executive dean? We used to have 2 provosts at Berkeley, one for letters and science, which is 75% of the students and half the faculty, the other for professional schools and colleges. We don't have that anymore, but we have an executive dean who kind of herds the cats of the 5 deans of letters and science, and that was me for 8 years. My primary accomplishments there were achieving a reduction in administrative staff of about 20%, with better operations, I believe. We increased fundraising to the college by a factor of 3, with averaging now about $60 to $70 million a year. And lastly, when I returned from a year sabbatical in Santiago, Chile, I was determined that the college really needed to take leadership on campus in terms of undergraduate education, where Berkeley, frankly, has not had a lot of leadership. And we developed what we called the Faculty Forum for Undergraduate Education, consisting mainly of Distinguished Teaching Award members across the college in all fields. And they worked for a year and a half together and came up with a group of recommendations, many of which have been implemented. One is the Big Ideas courses, which I will discuss in a minute. The Teaching Excellence Colloquium, which is basically a boot camp for all new faculty on campus that is now required of the faculty. The On the Same Page program is another program that was created before but is part of this portfolio. This is our freshman book program. We undertook an ongoing process of the examination of the efficacy and meaning of student course evaluations, and I could give you a whole lecture about that, but it's something we don't do very well and blatantly discriminates against women faculty, as it turns out. And we also developed the first academic honor code for the UC system as a project with the undergraduate and graduate students. So what lessons do I have to offer about leadership from all of this? First of all, the most obvious thing I want to say about a dean or a provost is that something that goes beyond mere honesty, you always want to be honest with people, is the trust and integrity with which your colleagues regard you. When people come talk to you and ask for things, you often say no, sometimes you say yes. They need to leave the room feeling that the provost or the dean is squaring with them, that they're not saying something else to someone else, and that this may sound elementary, but believe me, when it doesn't work, it plays out very badly, and it's something that you have to be exceedingly thoughtful in how you communicate with the people that are working with you. As I mentioned, this issue of clarity on budget is something that I am somewhat fanatical about. With regard to the activities-based budget, we don't have that formally at Berkeley. Of course, we do pay attention to where students are, and we have methodologies. But I'm a geophysical modeler, and I want to say that one of the things we modelers say is that all models are wrong and some models are useful. And with regard to any kind of budgeting methodology, I think that it's a good tool and it's informative, but it cannot override our judgment and our moral commitment to the mission of the university. And so I'm interested to learn about ABB here. I understand that it's fully implemented, but I can tell you that I would not be the kind of person who would be happy with a formulaic application, because the mission of the university comes first, and that involves our judgment. My mantra as dean was always that my first job when I get up in the morning is to make sure that my department chairs are successful. And if they get all the credit, that's all the better. And that served me very well. And I think as a provost, my mantra would be my first job is that the deans would all be successful, because they're the people who are really in the trenches trying to execute on strategic plans and with donors, et cetera. I think another thing is that you really have to hold yourself accountable, and you have to admit your mistakes openly, joyously, maybe, even to let other people know that we're all very fallible, and a certain amount of humility and sense of humor about your mistakes are always in order. I've already mentioned about diversity, but because this university is so committed, I want to say more, that this issue of walking the walk instead of talking the talk is very important to me, because there is a large body of social sciences research to which we all need to pay attention that tells us how to address these issues, everything from stereotype threat to implicit bias to dealing with students' preparation, differential preparation, and so forth. And I'm absolutely certain that the primary problems of diversity that we inherit, we can't solve all the problems of the university in the K through 12 level, but the problems that we inherit are addressable, but we really have to be deadly honest in holding ourselves accountable for what's going on the campuses. For example, at Berkeley, underrepresented students and majority males enter Berkeley with equal interest in STEM fields. However, the graduation rate is half for underrepresented minorities and only 2/3 for women, as it is for majority males. We understand actually why that is to some great extent, and yet I'm the first person on campus who's ever released these data and in the form of an NSF proposal, actually. And so there's a need for deep honesty along with our intentions. I also want to mention that I think it is critically important for leaders, deans, provosts, presidents, to, whenever possible, yield prompt decisions on questions that are brought to them, because delayed decisions are demoralizing to faculty and to deans and people who deal with them. My goal is to always have my email inbox never exceed 1 page. I think most of you know what I'm talking about. That's challenging. But I really am not a person to kick the can down the road, and I like to see things get done, especially when it's obvious that something needs to be done. So I want to talk about why I returned to the faculty 3 years ago. It was actually 2 years after I'd intended to. After 10 years, I was really ready to quit. I was asked to stay on a couple of years, and then finally, some family considerations really overrode that, and but there are other reasons. One is that in my own research, took quite a remarkable turn about 4 years ago, made a major discovery about what happened at the time the dinosaurs were killed. The impact that most people have assumed killed the dinosaurs also triggered the largest volcanic eruptions in the last 200 million years of Earth history, and I thought that was worth pursuing. And I've been delightedly working on that. Thirdly, I love teaching, and I'm now convinced that one of my best qualifications to be provost is that I have not been an administrator for 3 years, and that I have been in the classroom with students. I love Berkeley students. They're really an incredible group of young people. I have a quote from a poem by Pablo Neruda, the first line in a poem that I keep over. I have 2 desks. I have a research desk and a teaching desk. And over my teaching desk, there's a quote that says, "Juegas todos los días con la luz del universo." Juegas todos los días con la luz del universo. It's the first line of a love poem. It means you play every day with the light of the universe. Now, for Neruda, that was a love poem, beginning of a love poem, which he was wont to do very often. But for me, tells me what I see in the eyes of students every day when I walk up in front of a classroom, which is an incredible privilege to stand up in front of a bunch of young, eager people wanting to learn, many of whom come from difficult backgrounds, for whom your university is the point of light for them. And for me, they are the light of the universe. And I keep that over my desk because it's easy to get bogged down in the difficulties and the chores of teaching. But every day I walk up in front of that class and I see those eyes on me. And that's why I'm there. And that has been enormously rewarding to me, and it plays out in a whole variety of ways. As I mentioned, I not only started this sequence of Big Ideas courses, I teach one. The nature of these courses is that we'll pick a big subject. For example, there's a course taught called Prison, which involves co-teaching faculty from the school of, from architecture, from the law school, from sociology, from psychology, and another department, engineering. And all of these teachers are talking about one subject simultaneously with students. And what this process does is that it breaks down the traditional authority structure of teaching, because you're not the only expert in the room anymore. And the students learn very quickly that the questions your colleagues ask of you and the challenges that they make are the same ones that were on their minds. This, to me, is a different form of education and incredibly gratifying. I teach a course on time. I'm a geologist. I teach a course on time with a string theorist from the physics department. So we cover everything from, he covers general relativity and Heisenberg uncertainty. I cover the, when did the dinosaurs die, when did the Earth form, and what is the pace and periodicity of climate change, et cetera. We also cover, and I've had to learn a good bit of this myself, we cover aspects of the psychological perception of time, and which is a fascinating subject about how culture and language, for example, influence our metaphors with time. 2 hours before one of the classes I taught in September, Donald Trump's announcement about the ending of DACA came out. DACA means Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Our top student in my department is a DACA student. There are 450 declared DACA students on campus, and probably 2 or 3 times that many, in fact. I was so angry, I hardly knew how to step up in front of a class that day. And I knew I had to say something to them because there were protests breaking out on campus. It wasn't clear that we should be even holding classes that day. And the students were really, really upset. Students who were not affected probably always knew either a friend or a family who was affected by this. And I didn't know what I was going to say. I was walking to class, and it kind of dawned on me as some inspiration out of the blue. And I decided what I was going to do, and I'm going to share that exercise with you. And it comes into the question of perception of time. So I asked all the students, I said, we're talking about perception of time. Let me do a poll, and I'm going to do that poll in this room. How many of you have memories from when you were 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old? Anybody here remember anything from when they were 2 years old? How about 1? So I talked about to the students the fact that it's really interesting that your whole conscious nature, in a sense, your language, your friends, what you perceive about the world around you and the world you know, is developed sometime after maybe 2 or 3 years old, where it's in your memory. And then I looked up at the students and I made eye contact with as many as possible of them, and I said, well, that makes us all childhood arrivals, doesn't it? I didn't quite know what was going to come next, but it turned into a very healthy discussion about things that these students had on their mind. And it illustrated to me the incredible opportunity we have when we open ourselves intellectually to the students that are those lights looking at us every day. And also, of course, the incredible gift of being a professor in a public university where these things count so much. So that leads me to the last part of my talk, I hope I'm staying within time bounds here since I'm talking about time. How am I doing? Oh, I'm doing okay. The future of public higher education. I was asked to speak about the future of public higher education. I'll just say at the outset that in my view, public universities are the essential pillars of democracy in our world, perhaps more now than ever before, where we focus on citizenship and social progress and discovery, and we stay true to liberal arts education for students even in very specialized subjects. We teach skepticism and optimism, hopefully critical thinking, and we are now swimming as a society in an ocean of what I would call confirmation bias. Conservatives can turn on Fox News, liberals can turn on NBC, you can find echo chambers online wherever you want. And there's never been a time when we need our students to understand better the importance of being able to think for yourself, to think critically, to be skeptical, and to try to understand what other people think and how other people feel. So that clarity of mission is so manifest here at the University of Washington. It's mainly the reason I'm standing here today, and the leadership from your president, Anna-Marie Kause, is certainly exemplary and inspiring in that regard. I could spend a lot of time using the buzzwords of higher education about, online education and flipping the classroom and so forth, and bore you with that. But the main A central message I want to give you about my attitude about the future of higher education is the following. We can have all the commissions we want and people can write all the books they want trying to predict the future of higher education, but who in 2000 among you in this room would have predicted Facebook? It is really difficult to know what we're going to face 5 to 10 years from now. But I also work on mass extinction. Who survives a mass extinction? Well, organisms that can adapt. The essential quality that I think the provost should encourage in a university like this is no kind of top-down solution, here's what you should do, but to provide and build the ecosystem for adaptation, change, flexibility. We may be politically liberal in these institutions, but we are exceedingly conservative structurally. The Berkeley that you would find now in terms of degree programs and courses of instruction would be easily identifiable to a student from the 60s. This is true across most of higher education. In order to be resilient, in order to be a 21st century university, we have to build a culture and an infrastructure adaptation. And part of that is putting in place a reward system that actually rewards rather than punishes faculty for innovation and teaching and research and in nurturing their students. So I have a limited amount of time, and I would invite questions. I could answer all sorts of specific questions about this. But in terms, again, of the role of the provost, I would see the role of the provost is to enable the faculty and to enable the students to move forward and to react in a resilient way to these forces of nature that we cannot really anticipate. In that regard, I would also comment that the modern university is becoming a much flatter landscape. This relaxation of authority structure, which I find so innovating in teaching the Big Ideas courses, applies across the board. I don't know about the faculty in this room. I learn as much from my students nowadays as they learn from me. They all have their laptops out when I'm lecturing, and they correct me occasionally. It's a very exciting environment, and no more exciting time to be in higher education. And the University of Washington, I think, is beautifully positioned for this. First of all, I would say that you have already exhibited an attitude of innovation and flexibility that is unusual. For my Berkeley colleagues out there who may be listening, I'm sorry, but it's better than Berkeley in that regard. You have a very healthy regional context of relevance. You have a well-run campus, I believe, financially and administratively. You have Tacoma and Bothell, which are creative outlets and also outlets of service to the state of Washington that are unusual and tremendous opportunities. There are problems here, some of which I recognize from having been on the faculty, and I don't want to cover those up. For example, the salary compression issue here for faculty and the lack of incentives once you're tenured here to create and to produce and to remain vital is something that I know you have tried to address, and I'm sure you will continue to address. Part of it is having enough money to reward people beyond the salaries that they get coming in as assistant professors. But this, there really is a need here for a system that is more rewarding of all faculty for contributions and innovation and advancing the goals of the university. The level of graduate student support here is not adequate for some of the aspirations. The baseline of fellowship support needs to be increased, and that will help make more consistent the quality overall of the academic programs here. But these are all, to me, these are very manageable challenges. The underlying culture of the University of Washington is really exciting. This is a very collegial university. It's well run, and it has an attitude of innovation and room for and willingness to adapt and change that is really quite unusual. So 25 years ago, this was my dream job. I had to leave for family circumstances, and I'm very honored to be back and to be considered for this position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we now have opportunity for questions right here in the front row.
So Mark, you can't hit the ball out of the park with every pitch.
Sir,
I'm Mike Brown from Earth and Space Sciences. So given that not every ball is batted out of the park, can you describe a failure you faced and what you learned from it in administration?
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, the list is so long that I won't bore you. But I want to give you the example of the most instructive difficulty I had, and this was in these undergraduate education innovations that fell under the banner of the LNS Faculty Forum. We came out with what we thought, the faculty, I should say, with working with the deans, came out with a series of recommendations for improving undergraduate education that we were really, really excited about. And we went to great lengths in that process to make sure that on this body of faculty were representatives of the appropriate committees of the Academic Senate. You kind of know how this story goes already, don't you? But when it came to actually trying to implement these recommendations and move forward and work with the Senate, we found great resistance. There were all sorts of accusations: you haven't consulted us, this didn't pass out of our committee, et cetera, et cetera. And in time, we worked through that. It was an immediately difficult thing. It was disappointing to me as executive dean, all raring to go. But there are several things that I learned from that, other than the obvious thing is there's never such a thing as too much communication and collaboration. And that is that we have a very strong academic senate at Berkeley, and they do a lot of great work. In particular, they are the primary first line of defense in terms of overall academic quality of our programs, and there's tremendous respect between the administration and the Senate, so there's not a lack of respect. But there is a disconnect, which is that the Academic Senate is a very process and reactive oriented type organization. I cannot think, and I've actually challenged my Senate colleagues. By the way, I'm a member of the Divisional Council for the Senate, so I'm a mere faculty member and on the Senate now. We can't think of a single major initiative regarding the structure of education at Berkeley that's come out of the Senate in living memory. The initiatives tend to come from administrators. And I think this is a weakness. I think that were the Senate more proactive and not just kind of reacting to initiatives sometimes negatively from the administration or even from groups of their peers in the case of the Faculty Forum, but when administrators could invite the Senate to become more proactive, bring initiatives forward, and become more of an equal rather than asymmetrical partner, this would be a very good thing for all places that have an academic senate, that the Senate would feel more enfranchised, the administrators would feel a little more humbled, frankly, and there would be more of balance of investment rather than checks and balances. So that was a big learning experience for me.
Other questions?
It's an issue that's come up across a couple of campuses I've been at, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts on collective bargaining for faculty.
Collective bargaining for faculty. Let me frame that in terms of my own experience, because I think at UW, you're both behind and ahead of Berkeley in that regard. At Berkeley, we have all of our teaching assistants, which we call graduate student instructors. They are unionized, and in my opinion, that's worked out very well. All my colleagues don't share that opinion, but I think it's been, there actually have been some downsides to that. For example, the enforcement of a uniform salary standard across the UC system does not allow us to compensate for cost of living differences, which is a problem. But on the other hand, graduate students gained health insurance as a result of that, which in my opinion was a mark of shame for the campus prior. Also, our lecturers are unionized, and our postdocs as well. On the postdoc front, it causes some problems with grant management, which we've learned to overcome. With regard to lecturers, I think it's gone a long way toward enfranchisement of lecturers who, frankly, depending on the department, have not always been treated with full respect. There has never been a movement at Berkeley, as far as I know, to unionize the faculty, and I think the faculty would reject it very, very quickly. My understanding is that your legislature has mandated that lecturers and faculty must bargain, must be lumped together. And my guess is that as long as that's the case, there's going to be difficulty for the lecturers. That's about as far as I've thought about this problem so far.
Good afternoon. I'm Jill McKinstry, retired librarian from our amazing university libraries. I have to say that because the dean is sitting right here, and I think you met Betsy earlier. But I'm here today in my role as president of the University of Washington Retirement Association. And I know Berkeley has some wonderful programs for retirees, and I'd like to get your personal views on your opinion of the role of retirees at an institution.
Oh, wow. Did everybody hear that? That's a great question. What can I say? We have emeritus faculty at Berkeley that are just spectacular. People are living longer and healthier lives now. And very often our faculty will retire at age 65 or 70, and they still want to teach and they still want to do research, and they're still tremendous contributors to departments. So, as a general policy, we will make sure that they have an office and sometimes a laboratory if needed to carry on that work as long as they're active. And we have a special designation for emeritus faculty called Professor in the Graduate School, which is on a 3-year renewable basis. And this has been a wonderful innovation. I don't know if you have something like that here or not. But what it basically means is that we're going to treat you like a faculty member who doesn't have to teach, as long as you are advising graduate students and doing active in research and do contribute to the department in meaningful service ways. And this allows a distinction between faculty who kind of want to retire and still have an office for convenience, and faculty who retire and are incredibly active and giving to the departments. And it's, the university reviews all of these applications. And I think the system works quite well because I think that our faculty who retire and want to stay involved feel welcome to do so. I would hope that that's the case here. If it's not, then you're missing out on something very important.
I'm Christopher Hoffman in mathematics. So in the past few years, we've seen on college campuses some tension between the rights of free expression and the rights of students to feel safe and welcomed on campus. And I was wondering how you view resolving those tensions.
Well, as you know, that's an exceedingly difficult question to answer at this time, and I'm afraid that almost anything I say I'm going to regret in the future, but I will say something about our experience at Berkeley. Free speech movement started at Berkeley, and I think it's really good to remember what the free speech movement was and what it was not. The free speech movement was basically an argument about whether or not students could have tables and booths on Sproul Plaza to, make known to other students, for the most part, their political views, their commitments to society, et cetera. And if you think about it, it was kind of a petty thing that the campus felt like, the leadership, or the regents at least, felt like this was some kind of an imposition on the campus. And it turned out there was a very charismatic leader, Mario Savio, who led a student, and I emphasize that word, a student protest that occupied Sproul Plaza and, of course, is now famous. The current situation, and I guess Milo came here before he came to Berkeley, is really quite different and quite a bit more of a challenge. There's not a person in this room, I'm certain, who is not committed to free speech. And free speech, of course, is a pillar of our Constitution and the essence of American society, that the expression of your views, your political viewpoints, sometimes odious to other people, is a guaranteed right in this country, both in written form and in spoken form, of course now in social media. However, as you also pointed out, the safety and rights of our students come first. And this is a university campus. It is not really intended. What we do here is not first and foremost to provide a forum for everybody in the world, especially people who are deliberate provocateurs, to make themselves famous. At Berkeley, we have struggled with this, as you well know, and I know there was a struggle here. Our rules of appropriate time and place for demonstrations are being changed now to respond to the current situation. And the primary requirements that are passing through the Senate right now have to do with appropriate advance notice and what constitutes a quote-unquote major event, and provisions for security and the responsibility, and a distinction between activities that are truly student-driven and student-promoted and activities that are primarily serving as fora for outside people. These are, I would be pretentious were I to try to say, well, I know the solution and here it is. We are being tested, okay? We are being tested precisely because of what we represent as a public university. They're coming to University of Washington, University of California, Berkeley. They're not coming so much to Princeton or Stanford, because we represent the people of the state, and we represent a very large number of impressionable students. And so I think that striving to find that balance, to be fair and to truly guard free speech, but to also realize that our business here is to educate students, to look after their safety, and to be inclusive. Finding that balance is going to be a struggle. And there are going, the more we develop rules and processes and procedures to deal with this, there are going to be clever people out there who try to get around them and try to make a mockery of them. So I do not kid myself. Frankly, this is one of the more intimidating parts of being a university administrator these days, is dealing with these situations. But I think that if we maintain a balance between free speech, the right to free speech, and our service to our students, appropriate, care and security and inclusiveness for our students, will come out okay. And I think that, ironically at Berkeley, when Milo finally did show up a week or so ago, he spoke to 50 people. And ironically, it is probably what I would say, genuine, principled, conservative students on campus who have suffered the most from this, because they have been made a mockery of in this process. Clearly, he does not represent their thoughtful conservatism right? And so we got through it. And it cost us $1 million in security funds. That's too bad. Carol Christ, our chancellor, took that high road saying, well, I'm going to come out at least this time on the side of free speech, and we'll figure out how to pay for it. But this is going to be an ongoing struggle. We hope our new rules are effective.
I think we have time for one more question. Paul?
I think this is a much easier question. You talked about the need for timely decisions. You might have mentioned a word like trustworthiness and integrity. I'm not sure exactly which words you used. Did you ever, in the course of your administrative experience, make a commitment or something close to a commitment that you then couldn't follow through on, perhaps things beyond your control? What did you learn from it? How did you deal with that?
I can't think of one. I'm sorry, I probably will think of one tonight sometime after that question, but I'm a very cautious person in that regard. I can't think of a commitment of that nature that was ever made to me or one of my colleagues by a provost either. This is really fundamentally important. I mean, there might be some small cases where you argue over a few $1,000s or a few $100,000 here or there. But, if you're talking about a $2 million startup package for an experimentalist or the teaching assistant budget for a department or something like that, no.
Well, I want to thank you very much for this inspiring talk, and thank you for coming to visit us. And please give him a round of applause. On the search and fill out the survey forms for all of our visitors. So thank you very much for coming.